Finally, we have a 540 RPM pulse back and it's kinetic to boot. Time Worn Spire is brand new with the arrival of Season 13, The Chosen. It drops an Iron Banner, which is good and bad. I say bad because you can only farm it once a month whenever the event is around, but then good because it's somewhat of a focused farm. It's hardly a focused farm at all. Iron Banner desperately needs a way of narrowing down our token rewards. I spent nearly 3,000 just to get 5 different pulses. Fortunately, combining forces with my buddies Hyper and Ivan, I was actually able to test over a dozen different kinds of rolls extensively this past week, and I'm here to explain to you exactly what you should chase and why. To help bring everything together, I'm going to cover 5 topics. Pellet Direction, otherwise known as recoil. Pellet Spread, which is how tight those 3 bullets go within one burst. Zoom factor and why it matters. Individual perk ratings as well as perk combos and what I think the actual god roll is. And then at the end, I always like to give some sort of a stat range for you to go for because there's often different ways to reach certain range and stability combinations amongst all of the different perks. And just before we get going, I want to talk about the Discord. We're inching towards 2,000 members, so if you're looking for anyone to play with, you have questions whether it's PvP or PvE related, maybe you want to practice in the weekly scrim environment that we set up for people to try and improve, or you just want to hang out. The link is down in the description. I hope you decide to join and I'd love to get to know you further there. First up is Pellet Direction. Look at this single burst from the pulse. It pulls over to the right an insane amount.
He's already pulled over! He can't pull over any farther!
Normally you wouldn't catch me taking the Icarus mod off, but in this case, counterbalance is the perfect solution to this, and I want to explain why, because it isn't always helpful for fixing things like this. When you inspect a gun in-game, unfortunately you can't actually see the recoil stat, but you can look it up online. Third-party apps like DIM will show it as having 60 recoil base. Both digits in this number are very important, so I'm going to give you a crash course on recoil. Picture a Christmas tree. Then pretend you're smart like these 2 Reddit users who made this amazing function to give us a graph like this. It's basically an inverted sine wave. This is a depiction of what your gun's gonna do relative to what the recoil stat is on it. This line in the middle with all of the ticks are from 0 to 100 to represent that recoil stat. The green line is what your gun's gonna do based on the recoil stat that you have. So for example, I said the Time Worn had 60 recoil, right? So you'll notice on this graph that the green curve is on the right-hand side of that middle line. That just shows that it's going to kick to the right, just like the footage that I showed you. If it had a recoil stat of 70, it would actually start to kick to the left. Now, the reason why the peaks and valleys get smaller as the number goes up is because that's exactly how the stat works. The higher the number, the better it is in terms of how much it's going to kick, but the direction it kicks is all about that second digit. So you actually want it to end on a 5. For example, if I took a gun with 90 recoil, the kick isn't that bad because although it's going to the left, it's really not that much since it's such a high base value. But what the counterbalance mod does is it actually adds 15 to your stat. So in this case, I'm actually going all the way from 60 up to 75. That's perfect because landing on a 5 means it won't kick left or right. Here's an example of spamming the same gun with and without a counterbalance mod. What I want you to pay attention to is as your second digit gets closer to 5, it's good, but as you get away from it, it's bad. A perfect example of that was the Claws of the Wolf. It had 53 recoil at base, I think. So when you added plus 15 to that, you ended up going to 68. So it would basically bump you all the way up to here, which really wasn't that much better. Of course, it was slightly less, but it wasn't worth it. In fact, I found a targeting mod to be a bit more beneficial to me in that case. But for the Time Worn, adding that 15 is the perfect amount to go to 75. Next up is the Pellet Spread, or I should actually just call it Pellet Stability. A weapon's stability number has many functions, like resetting the aim assist degradation faster or simply having less visual kick, but today's focus is all about this Pellet Spread. Higher stability on the pulse doesn't just mean less visual kick, but it actually makes the pellets tighter. I'm using the counterbalance mod on the examples you're going to see going forward, but just take a look at these 2 different rolls. One of them has 18 stability and the other one has 63 stability. This gun can actually get up to 90 stability, but I just wanted to show you that even as low as 63 in comparison to the lowest roll you can get is an enormous difference and can easily be the difference between winning and losing an engagement because there's way less chance of one of them missing given the fact that Destiny's got high aim assist as it is. The next piece I want you to be aware of is zoom. This comes from the scope you select in that first column of the gun, and the way zoom works in Destiny is both amazing and awful at the same time. Think of it as a multiplication of the existing situation or stat. For example, having higher range on a gun tightens the accuracy cone, which is where you tell your bullet to go. It basically means less RNG and a better chance against bloom. Well, what zoom does is it acts as a multiplicative factor on that function, so it tightens that accuracy cone even more, meaning better hit registration, better bloom, better damage drop off too, and it's insane in this case. I'm about to show you two different pulses with the exact same stats. Stability is identical, but they have different zooms. I know that scopes change the stats, but I had enough rolls to play around with so that I could do this test. The first clip uses a minimum zoom scope, then I look through a higher zoom scope at those pellets just so that I can compare apples to apples with the second pulse rifle. The second pulse shows you a maximum zoom scope, just to show you that zoom can act a little bit as a stability factor if you happen to have a roll with really low stability. And it's absolutely noticeable in my gameplay when it comes to hitting my shots. The next part about zoom is where I mentioned damage drop off. Here's a rough chart showing you the impacts of zoom. The 10 range pulse can have the same damage drop off as a 70 range one thanks to its scope. Sometimes it can be tough to visualize these distances relative to a map, so I wanted to just show you a quick picture with a couple of them on there. Truth is on the far left hand side, and I know it's kind of tough to see here because I wanted to get it in one screen, but Ronald is sitting at I think 49, 44, 31, and 27 meters. P.S. If the numbers in that table seemed kind of insane to you, I did field test them all, and I'll take this opportunity to highlight some of the work that a content creator named Monks does. He created an in-game range calculator based on all of your weapon stats and put it on a really user-friendly website. I'll put the link in the description below, but I will mention a good friend of mine, Dre, who runs d2gunsmith.com, ended up working with him and incorporated this information right under the tooltip section of his website. All you got to do is set up your gun's perks on the right-hand side, hover over this piece, and bam, now you know what you're going to be able to do. Just before we move on to the perks, I will mention that it's a bit jarring when you play with a high zoom scope. Don't forget the fact that it can help a low stability gun a lot, but you should probably be aware of that chart so you know if you're on a small map, you don't really need it. Now let's cover perk selection before wrapping up with my recommendations. The first column is all about the scopes, and the second column isn't really make or break for a gun, so I'll actually save this for when I talk about the overall stats at the end. Jumping into column 3, starting with Feeding Frenzy. It's fun when you start chaining kills in 6s because the reload gets pretty ridiculous, but I'm typically making these reviews to give people the best chance in something like comp or trials where one kill matters the most. In those situations, this is a wasted perk. Quick draw is incredible on pulse rifles. Even though pulses are one of my favorite weapons, I've always hated how crappy their handling is, and quick draw completely solves that. Not only does it make you pull it out faster, but it also helps you ADS faster, which is a huge piece, especially on this gun because it can't roll with snapshot. On top of that, the benefit of the faster ADS also stacks with your targeting mods. And when you need to switch to your special weapon, it makes a massive difference for securing that kill. A great pick overall. Moving target is such a nice perk too. It adds 10 aim assists to the gun, which in this case means you can pretty much reach the cap. Time Worn has 79 aim assists at the base. Add 10 more with a targeting mod puts you at 89, and then another 10 with moving target to sit at 99 for maximum G fuel snorting. On top of that, it buffs your strafe speed while ADSing, which is so nice because I hate how slow you move left to right when you're ADSing your pulse rifle. Another top pick for me. Under Pressure. Now this one actually surprised me. I didn't think I would like it because it's literally doing nothing for the first half of the mag. In a lot of my other videos, I often talk about going for things that are always helping you passively, but this one was actually pretty noticeable. When you're halfway through your mag, it adds stability. There's some 200 IQ folks out there who have figured it out to be around 20 stability that it adds, and it helps your accuracy cone to combat bloom as well. Some of those folks figure it's between 25 to 50%, but don't quote me on that. Even though I was impressed by this one, I still marked it as average because it's definitely not as good as moving target or quick draw, and I have a tendency to reload quite a bit. I will mention though, if you're chasing rampage stacks in 6s, it can definitely help. Slideways is one that I definitely like because it encourages movement. When you slide, it reloads part of the mag, and then it adds both stability and handling. It's nearly 3 seconds long, so for a rapid fire pulse, that's actually plenty of time for you and your engagement. I slide into nearly every gunfight I have, plus if I slide around a corner and I see a Titan screaming at me, I have higher handling in that moment to swap to my special weapon and do him dirty. The last one is Subsistence. This one's no good in PvP. The reload per kill is cool for 6s, I guess, but you have less bullets, and it's just, don't use it unless it's on like the best version of your gun in regards to stats. Okay, onto the fourth column, starting with Rampage. I get flack for this one quite a bit because I'm not the biggest fan of trigger perks. The reason is because in high level play under a 3s playlist, if you watch VODs enough, you'll notice that these things don't actually happen as often as you think. And I should know, when I say it doesn't happen very often, I don't actually mean it doesn't proc very often. Maybe you are getting it to proc, but against really good players, the timeline of your rampage is so small that you don't end up getting to capitalize on it as much as you'd like. That being said, of course, it's very strong when it does proc and you have targets in front of you. So in 6s, if that's your jam, it's a solid pick. Vorpal gets an asterisk. This is not something I want overall, but I definitely encourage keeping one roll with this for trials when supers are coming up. Using this with intention against a super can catch opponents off guard very often. One for all is no good in PvP. That's that. Even in 6s, you really just need the right circumstance. Moving on. Iron Grip is fantastic. I'll talk combos in a bit, but earlier I showed how crucial stability was for the Pellet Spread, and this gives you it at the cost of reload. Pairing it with Slideways is amazing. This is a top tier perk. Seriously, it's all because of how crucial stability is on this pulse. Next up is Iron Reach. Damn this perk, you guys. It gives you 18 range, which is so sexy because I love range on pretty much every gun. But for the love of God, Bungie, minus 36 stability is insane, especially on a pulse where it also impacts the Pellet Spread. I must note that it was fun using a maximum range with a high zoom to really get that 50 meter damage drop off, but you don't really need that full 50 meters that often, do you? And although we showed zoom can help your stability, it's not quite enough to make up for the 36 stability loss unless you get the right roll, which I'll talk about in a minute. Last one in the fourth column is Iron Gaze. F this perk, you guys. I don't know. Is it just me? It's a really cool concept on paper. It pumps up your aim assist at the cost of range and accuracy. That sounds like a decent trade-off, but the 3 rolls I used with it all felt the worst by far unless it was a tiny map, and even then didn't feel that much better. The problem I have with it is the fact that targeting mods already add aim assist, so I'm sitting at 89 regardless. When I have Iron Gaze on, bumping my aim assist from 79 to 99, I'm still going to use my targeting mod for the fact that it has faster ADS speed anyways, so it's frustrating to see bonus aim assist over the cap just getting completely wasted, especially if you end up with moving target. Give me a sunshot with Iron Gaze, damn it, then I'll use that thing all the time. All right, let's button things up. I want to talk about a couple quick scenarios. First off, if you land on that Iron Gaze that we just talked about, even though I crapped all over it, just use it on smaller maps, or if you're on a larger map, put a high zoom scope on there to really help your damage drop off because you'll notice it. If you land Outreach and you have a high range roll, it's nice that you have a luxury of not worrying about what zoom or scope to use because you're basically good when it comes to damage drop off. Even though I didn't rank it as one of the top perks, if all of the other aspects of your gun are stability focused and you end up with like Slideways, for example, you can definitely combat it. If you land with Iron Grip, Slideways is really nice for 6s, but Quick Draw and Moving Target are slightly better for me when it comes to a 3s playlist because I'm not really that worried about reloading. For the rest of the combinations, let's just say you land with one of the non-stat changing Iron Banner perks. Rampage, for example. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I like to always give you kind of a range of stats to chase because those can be made up of all of the rest of the perks on your gun. With stability, 40 to 60 is totally manageable. 60 to 80 feels noticeably better. Above 80 is absolutely nuts, but you will have less range and you'll probably want a higher scope if possible. Regarding range, of course, higher the number, the better the accuracy and bloom, but just looking at damage drop-off in particular, you'll want to use a +2 zoom if you have 40 to 50 range total. You can get by with less, but you will notice you're not always hitting 24s. Still totally worth it if you have high stability though. Crossing the 50 threshold with your range is where you feel pretty well fine. And then of course, if you end up with one of the extremity rolls like over 70 range, you can have fun with that and pretty much use any scope that you want, but it is handy to remember that those lower range rolls can easily achieve that with slightly more zoom. My personal god roll would be a +2 zoom on my scope, ricochet or high cal in the second column. I'd likely go with Slideways because of how much I do that into my engagements, and then Iron Grip for the final column. This roll at the end of it gives me over 50 range and over 80 stability. The final note I'll end on is that remember, counterbalance helps an enormous amount on this gun, but if you get that pellet spread super tight with like 80 or 90 stability, you actually don't really need it that much anymore. I still like it though because I don't find myself using it in the air anywhere near the amount I would with a hand cannon. That's everything today, folks. If you guys enjoyed the video or you found it helpful, dropping a like or putting your thoughts down in the comments is super useful feedback for me to improve when I'm making my videos. And hey, it helps the YouTube algorithm understand that I'm trying to make a living. You know what I mean? I'm just bugging you guys. Have a good one. I'll catch you in the next one.